and welcome everybody from behalf of Devi Sansthan. I am Ashutosh and I welcome you all to another insightful and exciting episode of Disruptive Talks or Detox, our flagship event where we invite dignitaries and we discuss so many things, so many important things on education, literacy, and making a social impact. Today, with us, we have a very renowned leader from the world of policy and governance. We have Dr. Amit Chandra, who's the Chief Executive Officer of the India based think tank Center for Civil Society. Amit, welcome to Detox. We're really glad to have you here.
Thank you very much, Ashutosh, and I'm equally as excited to be here on Detox.
Amazing, amazing. It's going to be a conversation based on education, based on policy, and on the idea of how we change the landscape of education in a country like India and the world largely. So, we have so many things to talk about today, but before that, if you allow me, I'd like to give a small introduction for you.
Sure.
Uh, so, Dr. Amit Chandra is the Chief Executive Officer of the Indian based think tank Center for Civil Society. He is a passionate promoter of liberal values with an interest in improving governance in the area of school education and livelihood. He is also a social development professional with an experience in research and outreach. He played a crucial role in structuring and scaling up the largest network of low cost private schools in India. His works and views have been widely quoted in media and academic publications. Mr. Chandra mentors and advises several for profit and non profit organizations, and he's also a member of the few committees set up by the state governments. Previously, he has worked with the Asia Foundation, TAF, in Kabul, Afghanistan, and the Central Square Foundation in Delhi. That's so many hints to knowing what all has brewed down in such a great mind and in such an insightful mind. But today we are discussing about the landscape of education and how we change that landscape with increasing the quality, with making policy changes, and with bringing large impact within the education circle. So, Amiji, I would like to start. I would like to directly start with the questions, and I would directly jump into the conversation. But when we talk about the current education system, what do you think it's lacking largely, and where do you see a schema of hope, perhaps?
First of all, thank you very much, Ashutosh, once again for having me on Detox, and second is for the very kind and generous introduction. Uh, as we start thinking about education and education landscape and the problems and all of those, uh, I would like to, I have prepared a brief deck just to present some of uh, the key, I will say, things that is happening in the education space. And through that, we can start the conversation. And here,
Absolutely.
my request will be instead of making it a question answer as an interview, we really do a conversation wherein you can also contribute with your learning and I can contribute with my learning, and we see where and how the conversation is going. So, if you could put the deck, please. I mean, I thought to begin the conversation, this is important that let's broadly look at what is happening. And then I have taken some media reports from students' perspective, teachers' perspective, schools' perspective to just give a quick glimpse of what is exactly happening,
Sure.
right? So I have basically, I think, five media citations. Here is my first one. If it is visible to all,
Yes.
Um, so this is a news report uh, from Economic Times, and this news is about that there was one vacancy for wherein the minimum qualification was that the candidate should be simply class 5 pass candidate who
Wow.
knows simply who can read and write an application and should know how to ply a bicycle. That was the minimum qualification. And there were 62 positions for this government job opening. Surprisingly, for me and for many people like me, more than 93,000 candidates applied for this position, which also included engineering graduates, law graduates, management graduates, including PhD candidates, right? So here, my simple thing is in all of these uh, key questions that I am going to put forth to begin our conversation and discussion on the subject of education is this the first one. Why do you think, or anyone one should be thinking about as to why it is happening? Why, for such a low skill job required, high skill trained people, students and candidates are applying and actually willing to take that job? Now, my
Wow.
second media news that I want to cite is this comes from Uttar Pradesh, and in the state CAG report, Controller and Auditor General report, which was looking at implementation of Right to Education Act in the state, they found roughly 1.1 crore fake student enrollment in
That's a
UP's
lot.
primary schools. It's
Hmm.
just primary, mind it, not secondary or higher secondary schools. In just primary school, there was a huge post student enrollment. And post student enrollment simply means these are students on register on paper, but in reality, they don't exist.
Hmm.
So my first example was from higher education and skill perspective and employment perspective. The second was exactly from the admin perspective.
Hmm.
Third, my media citation that I want to bring in is about parents. Now, this news is coming from Chennai, but the phenomena is not so specific to Chennai. It happens in Mumbai, Delhi, Lucknow. These days, it is happening in Varanasi, other cities as well. What
Hmm.
is this story about? This is about when parents had to queue up all night outside a school in Chennai. For what purpose? Just so that in morning when the gate of the school opens, they can get in and get an admission form. Mind it, the queue was not even to take admission. It was just so that they could get an application for admission in a particular school. My next example is from teachers' perspective. And we all know that these days there are teacher eligibility tests, state level TET and central level TET. This media news is from Tamil Nadu, where more than 95% candidates who took this test, they failed. And remember once again that this qualifying test has been designed for those who have completed B.Ed, or many of them who are actually in teaching job. So those who are actually getting through a professional training to become teacher, qualify B.Ed, and they are going to teach in schools, and many of them actually in reality are teaching in schools. When they are taking the test to be permanent or become the to be appointed as a new teacher, 95% candidates fail. And once again, this phenomena is not specific to Tamil Nadu. This is happening all across other states as well.
That is indeed a very large number.
And here now my final news report that I am citing. This is from Governance Now magazine. This news report actually came in 2015 when RTE was completing 5 years. And on the fifth anniversary of RTE, this article was about that an act which came actually to give more education, ensuring that all children of the country have access to education, actually is leading towards closure, shutting down schools. And this news article was basically about roughly 1 lakh schools in India were on the verge of shutting down because of RTE. So
Wow.
now here I would stop this. I basically wanted to give you examples, real life examples as to what is happening in education. And then from here onwards, we can build a conversation. So, yeah. Now,
I mean,
Yes, please. Yeah.
Something that I observed out of this is how eye-opening these numbers are in terms of having such a large scale inclusion, or in terms of having such a large scale impact or effect, so to speak, because impact sounds positive in that sense, and it's affecting largely the system, right? And I think the question also was around the idea that what is something that's lacking. And I think the observation that comes out after these eye-opening facts is that what's lacking is actually the maintenance of that quality. What's lacking is, you to provide a policy that might end up helping people, that might end up like telling people the importance of education, so to speak, or telling people the importance of how to perceive education, because it's also become a rat race in one way or the other, right? It's also become certainly a number game, or certainly just a game where ghost students can pass off as nice, like, real students, and you just gain numbers on that. So, what are your observations on all these factoids that you presented?
Right. So, what was the key idea that you may interact with many other people working in education space, and you have already interacted with many renowned people, established name in education uh, segment,
Right.
and many people will give you talk about many problems, and therefore through this attempt, I'm not saying these are the only problems. There are many problems, but as a student of public policy and a practitioner of public policy, what all of these and many other problems that I could cite or you could cite, uh, indicates that these are all just symptoms of the disease. This is not the disease. The
Right.
main disease that is spoiling Indian education or not allowing it to grow and flourish as we want it is the poor governance of education system. So the way education system and education delivery is designed, that fails, completely fails. And one key indicator, eye-opening indicator, should be that think about it. If this was the situation in the beginning, post independence, like after 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, and we have these facts and figures, we could debate as to what we are doing well and not well, which of my policy and scheme is working and not working, why are we not able to implement ABC, initiatives, etc. But if after 70, 75 years, the state of education is wherein reports like Asar by Pratham says 60% of grade 6 students cannot do basic language and numeracy of grade 2. Let me repeat, 60% students of grade
60%.
6 cannot do basic language and numeracy of grade 2, which is meaning it's a deplorable situation we are into. The quality of education, the entire system and mechanism, for whatever purpose and reason and factors it has designed, it has absolutely failed. Right? We are not able to ensure the basic minimum level of learning outcome,
Hmm.
and that is clearly says it's a failure of the governance. And we need to take stock. We need to look at how the education system is designed. How do we make it transparent, accountable, efficient, delivering on quality? Unless we really relook at it, we may once again be treating the symptoms of the disease but not the disease.
Not that is it.
Yeah. So if you ask me the core problem, I'll say the fundamental problem is governance of education.
That's very rightly pointed out, because I think the way it flows, any decision or any policy, the way it flows, it starts from a specific kind of governance, and it flows into the last man standing. This also kind of supports the idea that if the act, or if the governance is done properly, that's when you actually end up impacting the last person standing in the line. And I think education out of everything is such a need, where we really need to impact the last person. We really need to make sure that whatever is being transpired or whatever is being perpetrated, it reaches to the last person, in the sense that they get educated, or even problems like this don't exist, that a second grade student cannot read or cannot write his own grade things. very important and very insightful. But that does also take me in terms of my curiosity to know about Center for Civil Society and about CCS in general. And as we talk about these issues, that there are these symptoms of these disease. Uh, what do you think CCS is specifically doing towards this particular spectrum or towards education specifically?
Right. Um, so,
Any major projects, any major efforts?
well, yes, at CSIS we are doing multiple things, but something I wanted to connect with the previous conversation is when we are thinking about education system, and system is designed keeping certain objectives. What was the key objective for Indian education system to be designed? And if you read the first national education policy and second and even the third one, the current one, the new one, the key at the center of everything, the key goal to achieve was the inclusion and equity in education. So
Right.
the larger goal to achieve in education has been whether we are giving the principle of equity is being followed so that everyone has access, and inclusion, that the communities who have been deprived, whether they are being included or not. And I think these are the good goals to keep.
Hmm.
But before even Right to Education Act coming in 2009, by 2007, India in some sense had already achieved the universal enrollment. So if you look at the net enrollment and gross enrollment data, we had pretty much 97, 98, 99% children already enrolled in schools, which means in some sense the goal that we kept, access and inclusion, ensuring everyone has access to education, is pretty much achieved. Now, what is the next thing that we need to assure is the quality of education, right? So now we have to make sure that students, children are coming to schools. Now they are actually getting educated, right? So quality of education. And the moment you will start thinking about quality of education, the underlying couple of, you know, system in design that needs to take place is whether how are we measuring quality, whether the
Hmm.
system is efficient, what is the cost of delivering, is what is the quality, how would we assess the
Hmm.
quality of education. So efficiency along with equity and inclusion, now efficiency, quality have to be the key buzzword in education. Now, coming to your question as to what CCS does about it, CCS is primarily a think tank, and therefore our major focus happens to be in looking at data and evidence to create new knowledge in education space. So when I said, well, by the symptoms of the disease, looks like it's a governance problem. Is it really a
True.
governance problem? So we look at the governance, I mean, the education system and design as to how it is designed, what is the problem, etc., etc. And this is what actually we did. So we were the Center for Civil Society was the first organization here I can say which for the first time pointed out this, I will say, genetic problem in education system and design, which is the operator of the schools and regulator of the school happens to be the same body.
Okay.
The Department of School Education actually runs its own school. At the same time, it is also the regulator because it decides the rules and enforces it and gives you recognition certificate or re-recognizes schools if they don't meet certain criteria, right?
Right.
So the regulator and operator is the same, which goes against the basic principle of public policy, the policy making, that these have to be separated. And this has been demonstrated in other sectors like airline sector, where DGCA is the regulator, it is not the Air India.
Right.
Similarly, in the telecom sector, it's TRI is the regulator. It's not the BSNL. But in education, what happens? The department, which is runs its own schools, is also the regulator for the entire sector, which is the
Um,
conflict of interest. So we had done generated evidence that is this the problem, and if it is a problem, how other countries have done. and we looked at how UK education system is designed, or Chile, or Sweden, etc., many other places. And we have published white papers and research papers and working papers on this subject.
Right.
While new education policy was being debated and formulated, we also met a couple of committee members that presented our work, our approach to look at this, and to large extent, people got convinced, and therefore the National Education Policy of 2020 under Chapter 8, one of the major recommendation is actually it says the problem statement as a conflict of interest, and as a solution, what NEP is recommending is to set up a new body called State School Standard Authority as an independent regulator, which will bring the neutrality in regulation across all different kinds of schools like private, aided, unaided, charity, missionaries, all of that. So what we do is kind of build knowledge and evidence. Many of these things that I'm talking, the research papers are available on CSIS website as well. And
That's
through this, now let's say for an example, when this recommendation is part of an, now you can once again ask me, well, this is what is already done. What are you doing now to get these ideas which have come on paper to be real on ground, whether these ideas are being implemented or not? Well, it has its own sets of challenges, but we as a think tank, we are not really an organization or consulting firm who would work with departments to get things done. Well, we would desire to do it, but we don't have that level of resources or expertise. What we do is we think of what kind of knowledge resources would be required to convert this idea into reality.
right.
So, for an example, now let's say one state is willing to implement this idea and set up triple SA. What would it require to do? So, because
Correct.
it is talking about reforming the education governance, the first thing needs to be done is let's understand how one particular state regulations are designed.
Yeah,
So,
it's also a lot about a lot about how this particular rules and regulations is being implemented, right? In terms of not just implementation, but also how the public or how the masses accept these regulations and how they act upon it. So yeah, I completely agree on that. Yeah,
which comes at a later stage. So we are thinking about what kind of public good we can create, which will
correct,
enable this process. So we
correct,
are creating state regulatory profile for few states. So for an example,
right,
let's say Haryana. Haryana wishes to implement it. Let's say the education minister, chief minister, and education secretary, they really want to implement it. What is the first thing they need to do? Because, well, education secretaries and education ministers are also there by design, but not by their expertise level.
correct,
So the first thing
Alert from Google
is
password required.
sorry. So the first thing needed to be done is understand the state regulatory profile, because there are multiple laws, right?
right,
So for an example, Uttar Pradesh has by and large 7, 8 laws that to that the entire system is designed, which also through these provisions under different laws, there are new bodies set up, and the bodies are given power for certain functions. Now,
correct,
some of these needs to be reorganized. So, when you're creating triple SA, the State School Standard Authority, which will take certain powers and functions from existing framework, right? And therefore, once you have the state regulatory profile, you know how many laws are there, what are the previous laws which would require to be either repealed or amended, what functions and powers current system and departments and bodies have, which needs to be taken to be given to this new body, etc.
right,
So, therefore, we are creating SRP, the state regulatory profile for select states. Then the second thing would be, okay, now I am convinced that this new body is to be set up, and these are the changes I need to do in my existing framework. But when I am creating this new body, can it be only created through an executive order, through a piece of legislation? What kind of roles and functions and responsibility and governing body, etc., it should have? Otherwise, it can become just another body like the previous ones. How it is different. So this
absolutely,
would require legislation to be created or some thinking of this. So we are creating multiple public goods which is available for states to use it, and also available in public domain for researchers and educators to use it.
That is, I think that opens a new spectrum of observation, a new spectrum of actually studying all of this. Because I personally, if I talk about my personal experiences with regards to how much I've seen around education or how much I've seen around policy for that matter, there's always a very set structure of things that happen. And I always keep questioning as to why they're happening this way, you know. And I'm really intrigued and really into, you know, like really impressed by what CCS is doing in terms of get digging in deeper with regards to what the actual cause is and how do you actually work on things which are on ground instead of just because, you know, as governments or as a governance policy, it so happens that you keep on either nudging the policy too much or you keep on spending too much on the policy. So there is no mediated ground, right, where you actually come to realize that yeah, these are the problems and this is what you have to deal with. So it's very, very, I think, inspiring, so to speak, more than motivational. It's inspiring to see that Centers for Civil Society is doing so much and on ground so many things, right? Which also brings me to another observation that as we're talking about policy and governance, how do you see the role of policy making in general, or public policy for that matter, in uplifting the quality of education as we speak? Because uh, it's also very important that not just the policies are, you know, implemented in numbers, that okay, we've done 100 policies or 100 like sort of projects, but it also needs to bring out some sort of quality, right? So how do you see the impact of policy on the quality of education?
So the big mess in education space that we are in is actually a result of messy public policy design, right?
Right,
And that clearly, evidently presents why it is so important. And that is what keeps me and my team motivated to work on the subject. Because we
right,
see that by designing the right policy framework, you can set the tone and impact for long term,
right,
right? So some of these changes that I just started talking about, like neutral regulator. In general, if I present this idea to anyone, they will say, "Hey, no, I think the major problem is the foundational literacy and numeracy, or
right.
low girls enrollment, or high dropout rate, or poor quality of mid-day meal," which will immediately sound as an urgent a
Correct.
problem that requires attention, rather than in the background thinking about governance and system and design, etc., etc. But if we are able to bring the right kind of system, one, many of the problems that we see today would actually not arise. Second, even if some of these problems which can come up, we cannot foresee almost everything. Yeah, we are
Right.
not Almighty God, right? But uh, those things will be mitigated and immediately addressed. And therefore, I see for me, the public policy way of looking at education, and not just education, other sectors also, is very, very important. That
Absolutely.
decides the direction on a long term as to where we are going to go. In some sense, if we can design, let's say, aircrafts that takes our imagination and fascination for many of us. Um, can you think of, you know, designing a system that runs on autopilot mode, right? That is
Mm.
the ambition we have to take. That system, which is, we cannot actually foresee all the problems, but can we design a system that as any problem comes in, it is able to customize and personalize and change itself to address the problem, right? So that is how I see the role of public policy, and then for me, it becomes absolute important.
I think it's also, as you said, autopilot. My mind exactly and immediately went to the idea of flexibility. You know, flexibility in terms of not just what do you teach children or what do you teach the learner, but flexibility in terms of how do you teach it. You know, because I think an autopilot is also essentially a flexible system which
Well,
can
yeah.
which can encompass but also include a lot many things, and I think with education, something like an autopilot would essentially mean not what you are teaching but how you are teaching it, because a 2 into 2 is 4, and that's what we've already been taught through rote learning. But we do realize after we grow up that, okay, it was just a cramming method, or it was just a method where we were stuffed with information.
Let
So
me let me add a few things to what you're thinking. I think one of when I'm talking about changing the regulation design, the other question you might ask is, well, how would the next level of regulation be different from the
hmm,
one that we have, and
right,
how are we seeing that the new system would not have its own problem, right?
right,
Which it may have. So one of the problem in education system, and once again these are what I see as a symptom, is currently one major problem is rote learning. Why
right,
there is rote learning? Because the education system is pretty much everything is very standardized, right? At a grade 10 level, this is the curriculum this you have. Based on curriculum, these are the textbooks that you have. Within the textbook, these are the chapters that you have to study. And this is the manner you have to study. This is how you have been trained to educate. This is how your classroom is designed, and therefore you see such an, you know shockingly, things are too standardized. I mean, you
true,
can ask, almost go to all the schools in country from grade 1 to grade 10 level, why all classes, irrespective of what subject you are teaching, are of 45 minutes, right?
true, exactly.
I mean, why none of the school teacher said, okay, I want to do things differently. I want to have 30 minutes class or 1 hour class, or we will have dedicated days. Today is a math day, English day, Hindi day, whatever subject day. And therefore, what has happened is it has stifled innovation.
Hmm.
So, because then you cannot, it has taken away autonomy of teachers and schools to kind of customize and personalize the experience of education. So it is not giving you authority. It has taken the authority from you, and it is basically, converted into all the teachers into robots. You are supposed to go to school right at this time, do things in a ABC manner.
It
You
has
are
mechanized a lot many things, so to say.
everything,
Yeah.
and therefore now we are pretty much creating robots.
which is uh, which is why it's funny for me, because I enter a classroom where I think a table of two was being. I remember this incident one time. I was in a classroom where the teacher was teaching the tables basically, right? Um, and it's so funny that rote learning tells you how to pronounce or how to memorize stuff in a very robotic way. Uh, it has always happened that you say two ones are two, right? But our children would say two ones are two, two twos are four. That doesn't make sense. There's nothing called threes are, fours are, or fives are, just like that. But the real table or the real meaning is two ones are twos, two threes are six, two fours are eight. And I think rote learning robot like mechanizes this setting in your brain that you have to learn it like two ones are, three ones are, four ones are, and that just keeps going on and on for as long as I can remember.
Now, can you connect this, what you are saying, is with the first kind of symptom of the disease I presented to the slide,
Absolutely,
which is
absolutely,
like 93,000, candidates and overqualified candidates, law graduate, management, engineering, PhD graduates,
absolutely.
are applying for low skill job. Why? Because of this rote, what has happened, long-term impact of rote memorization, rote learning, is that now you were able to gain the right scores in the
Correct.
assessment and tests, and therefore you have degree, but you have not really understood the concepts behind it, and therefore there is no application of the knowledge, and
Correct.
therefore, like, there was another study done, I think, by McKinsey, which says 90% or more than 90% engineering graduates are not employable because
Right.
they cannot So application of the knowledge is missing because you just memorized everything. You didn't really understand it. It's just you
True,
see the long-term impact, and therefore I see these are symptoms, not
true,
the disease. The
true.
disease is actually poor governance.
Absolutely. That also makes me wonder because as we're talking about rote learning and as we're talking about governance in general, uh, I think one major thing that governance or public policy should hold is finding alternative methods to learning, right? And as I speak of it, I also would like to inform our audiences and to you as well about accelerated learning for all, or Alpha, which is the flagship pedagogy of Devi Sansthan by Dr. Sumita Gandhi, where we find alternative ways. It's an alternative learning method where the children learn beyond rote learning, the children learn beyond the classroom, and they actually learn based on peer learning. They actually learn based on understanding numeracy and literacy in a very holistic sense, right? So when we talk about these methods, which are alternative in a sense, and which also do have results, because Devi Sansthan has successfully shown results in 18 plus countries and 30 plus languages. Um, what are your thoughts on such alternative methods, and specifically Alpha, if we speak about it, and peer learning?
My first and immediate reaction will be actually I won't call it alternative method. I will
Okay.
call it a mainstream method. Why so? Because and this is another something that should shock and surprise people, that one organization outside this gigantic education system can design something which works with students, able to deliver result, and then we are calling it alternate. And something that is designed is not delivering, we are calling it mainstream, right? Uh, and that once again takes us to thinking about that. One, we all need to understand that education is a very personal affair. It's a personal, private way of learning things, right? The way I learn as an Amit Chandra, Ashutosh might have different style and pace and rhythm of learning, right?
Hmm.
A, B, C, D, everyone will be different.
True.
And in this case, we need to allow multiple or hundreds of flowers to bloom. Hundreds and thousands of educators should be continuously thinking about what is it that is working for Amit and what is it working for Ashutosh and others,
True.
and innovate and create solutions, which actually your mainstream system is not allowed. And therefore, initiatives like Alpha becomes very important to demonstrate that the education system has to have certain attributes. One of those will be personalized learning, and it's demonstrating. It is not just giving on ideas terms like this is how I differentiate organizations like Devi Sansthan and work of Sunita Gandhi compared to us. We are working on that knowledge spectrum. What is the right design? But these are the people who have designed something, implementing and demonstrating that learning. So Alpha, I'm kind of fan of these models. I actually go and at multiple places I quote and give example of initiatives like this. So if you ask me, it's absolutely very, very important. And not just important, it should open eyes of many.
It's actually very, I mean, I would like to thank you on behalf of Devi Sansthan, because it feels really motivating and personally very progressing towards something larger and bigger. Because as we take our mission to educate everybody by 2040 or by 2030, we do see this as an inspiration that drives us, that moves us more closer towards our goal of making every person literate and numerate. And I do agree that this should be the mainstream, and that's what we are, I think, hoping and praying for. Because something that CCS does is largely implementing policy, or working on the measure of how policies would be created. But I totally agree that I think these are two different foundations, or two different sort of layers of the same concern or the same issue. Because As much as you grow with regards to implementation of policy, you also have to go with regards to like how well can you implement it, or how good results can you bring out. And I think Dr. Gandhi or Alpha has shown us a lot of that. um, Again, we were on the on so many points at in the conversation about changing the landscape, about this landscape of education that we're talking about. We've already talked about uh, mainstream, what is mainstream, what is alternate, how peer learning can happen, or how sitting with your friends can, or studying with your friends or learning with your friends can help in it. But I have a concern here that when you talk of changing the landscape, and this is something really public policy oriented, I think. How do you ensure that that landscape does not bother the quality? Or how is the quality maintained at the point where the landscape is being changed?
Okay. Uh, the very simple and quick way to explain it, one, the landscape of education, just like any other sector, has always been changing. So, irrespective of whether there is CSIS or not, and Devi Sansthan is not, or education secretary or not, things will be changing because it is always changing. The question is, how do we take it towards the desired change that we want to see, right? Now, let me bring another perspective here. India has now become the most populated country, right? Surpassing China, is the number one. And currently, we do have more than 30%, um, more than 60% of population below the age of 30 years. What we have all been talking about as an demographic dividend, right? That we need to capitalize. But we need to capitalize. The one question is whether we are doing it or not. And then the second thing is how long this dividend is going to be there. Now, if you follow the population trend, the trend we have indicates is India population will continue to grow until, let's say, 2040, 42 or something like that. And thereafter, after that point, it will also start declining,
True.
right? From there, your demographic dividend, your average young population will actually, the percentage or proportion of young population will start declining, and aged population will start increasing. What does it mean? After 2014, let's say 45, 47, 50, somewhere around it, we will have new set of problems that we have bigger, like Europe, bigger population which needs to be taken care, and therefore will require welfare measures and etc., and support services. And we have reducing number of young population which is actually active and kind of contributing into economic, right?
Right.
And therefore, if you look at it, we have this 20 years of window. We are in 2024, let's say by 44, so we have 20 years of window to convert our current young generation, the human talent and dividend that we have, in high capacity human capital, which should be like fast in economic growth and would generate the wealth that certainly they would use for to take care of themselves, but also then there would be extra money that can be taken through taxes, etc., to take care of elderly population and many other dependent population, right? And why I'm talking about all of these things, if you want the high capacity human capital by 2044, that manpower which is going to come out in the market, labor market in 44, is actually entering the classroom today, right?
True.
So
I
we
agree.
are at the situation where we need to now, there is no more time to waste and think and deliberate, etc., is high time. It's now has become further more urgent that we introduce reforms now, urgently, immediately. Otherwise, we'll miss that bus of this 20 years of window. Once this window closes, I'm pretty sure it's not going to open for a very long time, and at least not in our lifetime for sure.
As it is also said a lot of times in the education space, the time to act was yesterday.
Mm.
So that is also something that stands particularly true in terms of what you're saying. But yeah, completely.
It was actually yesterday, actually, that's true. But we will reach a time when we can't say it was even yesterday.
Yes.
The time is gone, it's gone for a very long time.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. It has been absolutely a wonderful time speaking with you, and delving into so many important points of public policy, governance, changing the landscape of education. And I'm sure that everybody who's going to listen to this, everybody who's going to hear your thoughts, are definitely taking so many pointers and so many important aspects of how to actually maintain the quality, as we discussed, or how to actually uh, treat the symptoms of this disease and largely the disease at large. But before we close this conversation, Amit, I would like to know your message to our audiences, everybody who's watching this, something inspiring, something motivating.
I don't know whether it will be motivating or not, but I think the most important role that needs to be played or needs to be will be played by parents. So the parents have to be the active vigilant of the system. We cannot just stay on the mercy of the system, or just be too dependent. We need to become more of a vigilant, clients or consumer of the system
Mm,
rather than passive. So I, I would like to see more and more parents actually raising questions. So as we started this conversation with, the title was Ask Why, right? We keep some of the question we ask why in this 40 minutes and hour of framework. We can't actually, there are hundred thousands of other questions to be asked. I think for me the best scenario would be when I see more and more parents are actually asking these kind of questions, and that would lead to the system change. And parents are the first guardian, right? So the change has to start from there, not from anyone else. Anyone else, whether your education bureaucrat or inspector or education minister or teachers or principals, etc., everyone is second. The most important stakeholder is the parents. Parents has to be educated, aware, and vigilant to ask these right questions. That will lead to the right kind of change.
absolutely. And I think that's a very strong note to leave this conversation on, because uh, as teachers, the responsibility is to be galvanizers, but we also have to understand that parents are rather the bigger galvanizers for this cause, because from them the students start to learn, the learners start to learn the most foundational things. And I am personally, I have taken down notes of so many things after this conversation. I am going to ponder upon, I'm going to act upon. And I'm sure that our audiences have also been very, very uh, impressed, and more than impressed, I think, aware about the policy changes and the governance changes that are going on. It is very important to act, and it is very important to act now, I think. And with people like you, Mr. Chandra, we think that the education space is definitely towards a progressive environment. So, on behalf of Devi, I would like to thank you and everybody who joined for this conversation. Thank you so much for taking out your time, and it was a lovely time speaking with you and getting all your insights.
Thank you very much, Ashutosh. Likewise, I'm very glad that we could have this conversation, and I would be further glad that more and more people benefit from this conversation.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
To everybody watching this, do subscribe to Devi Sansthan on YouTube, like and share this video, and leave your comments below on what you think could be more transformative for education. Because as we said, the time to act was yesterday. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you and namaste.